Welcome back, AP students. Hopefully this finds you well. And it's the first of what I think will be two different videos on Babylon Revisited. I've got quite a few notes here from my first read, and there's a few more I probably want to talk about, but I want to break it up into two different sections. Obviously, you've read Babylon Revisited if you're watching this video, or at least you should have. And let's take a look at it. This is my first read of it. I slowly went over it this morning. It took me about an hour, and obviously something that matters immediately is the title and the author. We know F. Scott Fitzgerald. He's the author of The Great Gatsby. We know the era he lived. We know the era he wrote about. And we know that he's one of the modernists. This is why some of that cultural background stuff matters. You know about the modernists, particularly about the expatriate writers. There was a lot of writers like Fitzgerald who, with this huge boom, went to Paris, got drunk a lot, tried to write a little bit, and there was this huge party atmosphere going on in Europe, particularly Paris, particularly amongst Americans, many of whom were behaving badly. And Fitzgerald was one of them. He is writing what he knows. And then obviously here he's writing about what happens afterwards. And so knowledge about him and what he writes about and what he has written about is something you should immediately bring into the text as you read it. Then we get to the title. If you don't know anything about Babylon, hopefully you did a little looking about that. Babylon is this ancient city, a great, rich, and confident city that ultimately fell. Biblically, it has a lot of connotations as well. The nation of Babylon was a major factor in the Old Testament, and in most biblical passages, it symbolizes this land of worldliness and really hedonistic behavior that ultimately is brought down because of its excess and its pride. And so to say Babylon, the title, is setting the setting for you, if you will. So really have to care about the author and the background walking into a short story. Now, in terms of setting, one of the things that really struck me about this was just how much the passage of time matters. We are going from what happened then during the time of Babylon, so to speak, this time of excess, and now the fallout. And so these two times are intermingling constantly in this. And that's such a common theme in short stories, and something it's an easy thing to write about and notice, and a lot of authors want to examine. What changes? Why does it change? What does time do to both characters and settings? Well, obviously a clear difference here is once Americans quit partying there, once the excess was over, there's a significant change. I mean, the text begins, if you go back and look at the beginning, it begins with him asking about a series of characters. They're not there. All of the people he thought would be there, or at least who had been there, are gone. And so even structurally, this text announces that we're going to look at what's not there and the changes because of that. All right, and the fact that these people are no longer there, that's almost foreshadowing that who he used to be isn't there either. They have all left, and the old him has left too. Everything has been changed because this setting, this Babylon, no longer actually exists. Now, the past may have passed away, but an obvious theme in this text has to be that the past intrudes. Boy, when I read about the two characters, his old friends who he runs into, and then one of them leaves him a note, I mean, that was the word that immediately came to mind for me. This is such an intrusion. He is trying to turn a corner. He is trying to leave this past behind him. And these people, symbolic of his past, keep intruding. He cannot escape it. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want them. You can clearly see he's trying to be polite, but yet there's no desire for him to fall back into this. But he can't escape it. So his old friends, this regret he has over the way he lived with his wife, the harm he's done to his sister-in-law and their family, and all of these memories he has of these ugly actions that he just can't believe he was a part of. They are in constant intrusion into his daily life now, even though he's changed. So even though he wants to change, even though he's worked hard for change, he's still got to answer for all those years that he thought didn't matter, all those years of waste. Now, when we look at change and setting, the physical space hasn't really changed at all. Paris is Paris. A lot of the same places are still there. But you look at what has changed, and it is money. The money is different. The excess is different. The waste is gone. And so the people who had money are changed, and they did not come out better for having had all of that easy money in the party now lifestyle. What's really interesting to me is his daughter, who didn't even live that time, or at least didn't recognize it, she sees the danger of the waste. He comes in and says, hey, I'm going to buy you anything you want, and she doesn't want that. She tries to turn him down and says, you know what, we don't have a ton of money, and I have things. These things aren't going to make me any happier. He insists. He doesn't know any better. He's trying to be the kind of father who she wants to be around, but she has seen enough to know she doesn't want excess. She doesn't want stuff. Vaguely, she recognizes the danger of all those things. Now, as we look at conflict in this, it's a complex conflict. He is obviously our main character, and he is fighting against a lot of things. There's clearly an internal conflict. He's fighting his past. He is fighting his regret. I mean, he cannot escape what he has done. He cannot escape that he got caught up in all of that. Many, many people did. And he recognizes that. He is sorry for that. But he can't quit battling it. It happened. And so he obviously has to battle that and battle the things that he did and his regret over that. Then there's this just huge battle with Mary and his sister-in-law. And he's got to reconcile her feelings about him and all the pain she carries that she attributes to him, and not incorrectly. She, in this story, is the collateral damage of the excesses of this time of party and waste. You hear it referenced. She and her husband were not caught up in it. Maybe not even because they were any better. They just didn't have that kind of money. They had to watch from the side, watch this partying lifestyle, watch this excessive waste, watch all this spending. They had to watch on the sidelines while this went on, and they had to live a responsible life. They didn't get rich quick. And so they may have been drawn into it. They may have gotten into this drug of greed, but weren't given an opportunity. But even though they weren't drug in, even though they have no responsibility here for all of these sins of the past, they're affected. She was damaged through no fault of her own. She had to watch her sister be ruined by it, her sister make mistakes, and watch her sister be completely harmed by our main character. And so now she carries around the pain of this past as well, a pain that she had no part in. And so in a lot of our stories, we've seen collateral damage from the mistakes of our main characters. Well, Marion is that collateral damage. She is paying for the excesses of this Babylonian empire that was American greed and money in Paris during the 20s. And because of that, she's going to fight him a lot. And we get a lot of strong, direct and indirect characterization of Marion. If we're going to talk about author strategy, I love the way she is built throughout this text. You get indirect characterization in the way she speaks to him, in the way she approaches him, in the way that She behaves. But there's also a lot of direct characterization where Fitzgerald just straight up tells you her pain, straight up tells you her anger, her resentment towards everything that he is. And so if you go through and look, just the buildup of her character in this is really Fitzgerald at his best. Speaking of character, to me what's really interesting about our main character is that he does nothing reprehensible in the present. If we look at him, his actions in the present, they're all solid. This is a solid character on the rebound from a period of a lot of mistakes. But he makes all the right decisions in this. He never succumbs to many of the opportunities to be a moron. He could drink more. He doesn't. He could go off with these friends. He doesn't. He could be self-centered, and he really isn't. He's not a reprehensible character. And in fact, I'd say most readers by the end of this want him to have his daughter. He seems to have earned it in some way. There is nothing in the present that makes him bad, which is rare for a main character. If we look at most of our main characters that we read in our short stories, they have flaws, they have complexities. Well, his complexity isn't in the present. His complexity is his past. In the present, he displays strength. In the present, he displays self-control and his ability to not go off the deep end when Marion is fighting him and then accusing him of all these sins in the past. There's great strength and self-control and just this measured approach to trying to live a good life. But still, he's got to pay for his past. His complexity as a character doesn't come from the present. It comes from who he used to be, from the setting that affected him so greatly, and now trying to move forward. So those are some early thoughts I had. This was my first read. I really enjoyed it. I like Fitzgerald a lot. Hopefully you saw a lot of things in the text, and I'll come with another video in a bit about some of the passages or quotes that stood out to me.